What up, dudes? It's Gaz, and welcome back to another Warframe video. So with each Prime Access launch, DE changes the stats of already existing Rivens. It's called Riven Disposition, and yeah, we're covering the Riven Disposition changes for Sevagoth Prime today. We'll be going over what stats changed on Rivens you already had, and we've also got some additional information today talking about the VERGLAS Prime, and how some of our worries might be alleviated here with some of the dev comments we've got from the past couple of days. I've also got a little bit of context we'll go over here, but before we do go over all this stuff, make sure you're subbed to this channel. We do daily Warframe video uploads, news videos, build videos, strategy guides, discussion videos. You're in the right place for Warframe content. Thanks for supporting recent videos. Alright, so let's start off, let's set the stage here first. So, DE has said for the last couple of months, actually it's been like about a year at this point, that they will not nerf any Rivens unless there's an extremely egregious, overpowered example. And basically if anything's problematic. And in their eyes, nothing in this game is problematic when it includes Rivens. Yes, that means the Torrid is fine. That means the Dual Toxicist is fine. Occucore is fine. Everything is fine, apparently. But you know what? One thing we thought wasn't fine, because we thought it was a glitch, was the new VERGLAS Prime's really high Riven stats. If you've watched, a video about the VERGLAS and the person had a Riven in there, you might notice the Riven is very, very high stats. And when new Primes come out in this game, they're supposed to have the lowest stats possible. If you look at some of the newer Prime weapons in this game, let's call it how about the Okina Prime? The Okina Prime, one of the newer Prime weapons. Actually, the Epitaph Prime is the best example. So we have the Epitaph Prime right here, the best example possible. The newest Prime weapon. There's no way they change the stats on this. This is a 0.5 Dispo Riven, the lowest stats possible. So we got 34.1% status change. We look at the Epitaph Normal, which has been out for a while. Funny enough, the Epitaph Normal actually has higher stats on the Rivens. So we're at 37.5% status change. Wow, what a big difference. Because the stats are different on the normal Epitaph and the Epitaph Prime, and that's the case for pretty much every weapon in the game. When a new version comes out, the stats will be lower, and over time they're going to increase the stat, hopefully. If the weapon is super, super powerful, they probably won't increase the stats, though. That's what we're going over today, and let's get into what the VERGLAS Prime's situation was. So now, unlike normal Prime weapons, when a new Sentinel weapon comes out, according to the devs, whatever dispo the previous weapon had, that's the one it keeps. So, that means, guys, that the VERGLAS Prime's dispo is safe. That 1.4, 1.5 super high Riven stat you have in your VERGLAS Prime, that's staying. Now, that doesn't mean they can't nerf it in the future. If they think the VERGLAS Prime is so ridiculously powerful with the Riven that it's like a problem, which I don't know, I feel like it's just strong in general, doesn't even need a Riven really, then they can start nerfing the disposition on it in Zaku Prime or something like that, whatever the next Prime Access is. But right here, we have a dev comment, community director, whatever their title is, thank you very much for helping us out here. The VERGLAS Prime's disposition is intended consistent with all other Sentinel weapons. So we don't get Prime Sentinel weapons very often, so that's why a lot of people didn't realize that the dispo is intended. So yeah, your really high VERGLAS stats are intended. Let's get into the full dispo pass here, now that we have talked about the VERGLAS Prime and the Torrid and all that, and how they're not getting nerfed. Alright, so starting off your dispo pass, we've got these organized by weapon type. Let's start with the primaries. If I have any examples I can show you, I probably will show you, but let's just get into what we have here. Alright, the Alternox. The primary of Gyre is getting a Riven buff. This thing gets Riven buffs like every single pass, and I still don't use it. So, if you like the Alternox, good for you. You got higher stat Rivens. And in a similar vein, the Ambassador, I think it's just like a Railjack electric primary, basically, also got a Riven buff. The exact same Riven stat buffs on these. Now, these little buffs from 1.1 to 1.15, you're not going to notice much difference on your build. Like you just saw my Epitaph Riven, like 3% more status chance, maybe 6% more multi-shot. You're looking at some small increases, but still increases nonetheless. Now we have the AX-52, the Tennokan drop weapon, going from 0.5 to 0.6. So expect like 12% more multi-shot in your Riven, decent little bumps up. But yeah, I mean, if they were to double the stats, you'd have a lot higher stats. They will never double the stats. They increase them I think 0.25 or 0.3 at most. So keep that in mind. The Cinta, the Daviri bow. This thing's actually really good. It's got a Riven buff again. This thing hits really hard, honestly, and I kind of want to try it out, but I have so many bows, I probably won't. But yeah, the Cinta is pretty good with a Riven, and it's even better with a Riven now after this change. The Evensong, the Bow of Jade. I actually like this thing a lot, but here's the issue with it. It looks cool, and it sounds cool, but what's the point of it? It's just a kind of like a normal bow with like a special puncture debuff passive. But either way, it did get a Riven buff from the lowest stats possible to 0.65, so a really nice little buff there. Expect like about 20% more multi-shot-ish on your build after that buff goes through. The Gotva Prime, another Twitch drop, but now it's a borrow item. Go from 0.65 to 0.7. Not too noticeable of a change there. But you might notice here, guys, there's no nerfs that we've seen so far. Now here's a big one that you might actually notice. The Kuva Sobek, the newest Kuva shotgun in the game, went from 0.5 to 0.7. So they put a lot of damage into those Sobek rivens after this change. That is a big buff. Let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the Sobek rivens I have access to, and we'll see how much higher the stats are now. Alright, so we're in the ship right now, and I got the Kuva Sobek equipped. We got a 60% toxin roll on this one. And that, let's see what we have. So this is my old Acid Shells Riven. This is for Saren. Now, I wouldn't really recommend using the Kuva Sobek with Saren, but you could use the normal Sobek with Saren. Let's look at these crit builds. I'm more interested in this. So, right here on this build, let's see what our Riven goes to. So, okay, I can already tell that's a lot better than before. 108% damage, 83% multi-shot, 65% fire rate, and plus 47% recoil. That's an actual slottable mod, when before it was hardly even slottable. So, Kuva Sobek Rivens definitely worth considering now, and this, like, Kuva Sobek Rivens in general are just stronger now, so they're still lower stats than the normal Sobek, so Acid Shell's still better on Saren, but we're creeping up there. It might be a little bit closer now that we have this Riven buff, because like on Saren, the Acid Shell's difference is a huge deal to me, because your Bane of the Corpus, your Bane of the Grenier, and your Toxic goes lower on the Dispo. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe a couple extra Riven buffs this thing will be better than the Sobek somehow, which would be very surprising, but technically possible. So yeah, so we went back onto these changes. Yeah, the Sobek got a big buff there, guys. Moving on to the next one, we got the Prisma Lens and the Kuva Tsar, actually. Kuva Tsar getting a buff from 0.6 to 0.65. I don't really use the Tsar anymore. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't really use the Tsar anymore. I guess that nobody's really using it as much, so the Dispo is going up, which is surprising for sure. You notice the Brahma's not going up, the Tonkor's not going up, the Ogress isn't going up for that matter. Only the Tsar is being increased here. That's pretty surprising, honestly. Because the Tsar still hits hard, just has a lot of annoyances with it, like bad ammo, bad reload, bad magazine, in my opinion, too. So, yeah, that's an interesting buff. I don't think it's going to change much, but still, if you're using the Tsar, you're pretty happy about that. Now, the Prisma Lens got a Riven buff as well. The problem with the Prisma Lens is that it's no Kuva Brahma. It's no Tenet Lens, for that matter, either. I think the Prisma Lens is definitely outdated, and we need a Tenet Lens in 2024, or 2025 for that matter, to make the lens actually stick out. It's an exploding bow that is very outdated at this point, but still has okay stats. That Riven buff not going to really move the needle much, unfortunately. The Stephalos, the primary shotgun of Citrine, very awkward weapon, but just like the Ultradox, it gets a Riven buff basically every pass because it's so awkward and not many people really use it. But yeah, there you go. If you wanted to use that, it's increased. Here's a nice little one right here, the Tenet Glaxian. One of the best weapons in the game, in my opinion. Got a Riven buff from 0.5, so as low as they go, to 0.6. So they actually were not as held back as some of the other weapons are getting these buffs here. This thing got about like a 12% or 12% multi-shot buff. Let's go ahead and show a build with the Tenet Glaxian. I did show up my video yesterday. Looks like we got a hotfix coming in too. Tenet Glaxian yesterday did get a Riven buff. So let's just go ahead and show what we have now. This Riven has 50% multi. I think I had like 42% multi-shot before, so like about 8% multi-shot buff on this thing. That makes this definitely more slottable. The fire rate going up too. The fire rate's still pretty low. This is still a low stat Riven, don't get me wrong, but yeah, a little bit better. Like this is technically now better than Vigilante Armaments, Toxin and multi-shot. It was lower than Vigilante Armaments before, and basically an unusable Riven. So yeah, there's some good stuff here for sure, guys. I'd say that the Tenet Glaxian is definitely getting stronger and stronger with these types of buffs, and it already was a strong weapon with that Photon Overcharge mod. And the final primary buff, the Vectis Prime, going from 0.85 to 0.9. You know, that's probably going to be good for a minus magazine size Vectis Prime build out there. I'll let you get your god roll a little bit easier on the math front, hopefully. Moving on to the secondaries here, we don't have as many changes. Notice there's still no nerfs. No nerfs unless it's an egregiously OP weapon, apparently. We have the Agrit, the exploding sidearm weapon, getting a Riven buff from 0.75 to 0.8. I actually sold my Agrit Riven like a couple weeks ago, and because I never used it. But yeah, it's pretty good with a Riven. You get like a multi-shot double crit, hits really hard. But remember, you only have 4 of these little mini bomblets out at a time, so yeah, kind of weird. Now here's one that's really surprising to me: the Icarius and the Icarius Prime getting a Riven buff. I don't think people realize how ridiculously good the Icarius Prime is for AoE clearing speedrunning missions. Like, you just go in there with Mirage or whoever, and you use the Icarius Prime. It's full auto now with the full auto change. You spam rockets. The rockets are basically the size of Brahma shots, if not larger. And the funny thing is, my Riven's actually pretty bad at the Icarius Prime, so I still don't even use it. But this buff might make it a little bit more viable with the Riven. Yeah, my main Icarius Prime build has no Riven on it. because my Riven's not very good. But yeah, Riven has 76% multi-shot, 44% fire rate, and 50% status chance. That's pretty decent, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of hard to replace anything on here. Maybe I'd replace, like, Hornet Strike with a Riven, or I'd replace, like, a crit chance mod with a Riven, I guess. Like, we have lots of prime mods in here you can't really replace. This is a crit chance mod just to fit on more capacity, because we're also kind of drained. Yeah, also, I have no capacity left on this build. I would have to replace Serration because, yeah, can't put on prime pistol and mutation and all these other prime mods and then still have all this stuff stacked up. So, either way, it's good to get a buff on this ridiculously strong weapon. What is the size of this AoE? Okay, 11.23 meters. So not as big as the Brahma, but it does fire out 2 rockets at a time, so it does feel like it's pretty much the same size, if not larger. So, pretty good stuff there. I definitely like the Icarius Prime quite a bit. Now, speaking of some other new stuff, too, the Ac Magnus Prime, which came from Borrow like 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. The Ac Magnus Prime is just the Magnus Prime, but times 2. But it doesn't get access to, like, the Magnus Augment, unfortunately. Ac Magnus Prime went from 0.7 to, or from 0.5 to 0.7, so one of the biggest buffs we've seen today, if not the biggest buff we've seen today. Yeah, actually, I think it is the biggest buff we've seen today. Well, same with the Kuva Sobek, actually. Kuva Sobek and Ac Magnus Prime got massive Riven buffs, so if you had an Ac Magnus Riven, you're waiting for the Ac Magnus Prime to get a buff so it would actually be usable. There you go. This is going to be great for you. It's a pretty powerful weapon, actually. But yeah, kind of a lot of effort to put it together in the first place. But yeah, Ac Magnus Prime, big Riven buff. That's great. The Cantares, the pistol weapon of Jade, got a Riven buff. I haven't really been using that thing much, but it does seem pretty okay. But a sizable Riven buff from 0.5 to 0.65, so that's good. The Onos, it's not even technically Dante's signature weapon. The random Incarnon we got with Dante Unbound in the pistol slot, get a Riven buff from 0.55 to 0.6, so it's a pretty good weapon actually, but it's not as good as like the Steel Path Incarnon. So nice little Riven buff there. Probably could use a little bit of a bigger one, honestly. The Velox Prime going from 0.5 to 0.65. Funny enough, the Velox Prime is actually lower stats than the Ac Magnus Prime, even though the Ac Magnus Prime is more recent. Now, for the Velox Prime, I don't really see anyone ever using this thing. Like, I would be embarrassed if I had the Velox Prime equipped in a mission. But I guess now that you have higher Riven stats, maybe it'll be a little bit less terrible. So, from 0.5 to 0.65, a sizable Riven buff, expecting like about 20% multi-shot on your Riven. And the Xylock Prime, still getting Riven buffs. I'm still not going to use a DE. From 0.75 to 0.8, make the Incarnon shot scale properly, please. But yeah, if you use Xylock Prime, there you go. Even more crit chance, even more crit damage on your Riven. For melees here, looks like we've got lots of melee changes. Are you serious? A Harmony Riven buff? Are you crazy, DE? What? A Harmony Riven buff? Alright, let's read what we have here. Starting off the Argo and Vel, the melee from Deviri, got a Riven buff. That thing's pretty good, but yeah, it's pretty slow, so I don't really use it that much. The Corafel, that shotgun melee that I think is like, it's like other, yeah, I think it's Citrine's signature melee. Thing's really good, got a Riven buff again, so that thing's going to be hitting harder than ever. Corafel didn't even need a Riven in the first place, but yeah, like a red crit shotgun melee, basically, very good. Dex Nikana got a Riven buff from 0.65 to 0.7, not going to move the needle much. The Doorclave, the signature weapon of Dagoth, got a Riven buff from 0.75 to 0.85, and that thing's actually pretty good, so yeah, nice there. The Doorclave might be worth checking out after this change, because it has, I think it's purely slash, and it actually has very good base stats, too, so interesting stuff there. The Dual Keres Prime, the signature weapon of Korra Prime, going from 0.65 to 0.7. I'm a fan of it, but I don't really use a Riven for it anymore, so probably not going to make that big of a difference. Now, someone has been calling this out to me. The Edun, the polearm weapon from Deviri, is going from 0.9 to 0.95. Apparently, this thing has the exact same stats as the Guandao Prime, but now has higher Riven stats than the Guandao Prime. Let's just take a quick look at that. So let's look at the Edun. So this is the Edun from Deviri, and let's go to the Guandao Prime. Now, if this just has the better stats, okay, they're very similar stats, actually. But I would say that maybe the Edun is a little bit worse, just slightly worse. But yeah, you're looking at a very similar weapon. Like, basically, it's actually more slash-weighted, it looks like, on the Guandao Prime. But yeah, very similar stats, but the Edun has higher Rivens now. Let's see, what was that? What was that dispo we were just looking at there? 0.95 dispo, so about 3 dots. Then what's the Guandao Prime have? Because the Guandao Prime did not get nerfed, but I don't think it's going to be going up anytime soon. Okay, so the Guandao Prime has 1 dot dispo, and Edun has 3 dot dispo. So Edun is actually probably better than this now, if you include a Riven, so that's cool. Thanks for pointing that one out, Ice Stars. But yeah, the Edun potentially better than the Guandao Prime after this Riven buff, and it might have actually already been better before this change. The Ekhine, the hammer from Whispers in the Wall, got a Riven buff from 0.85 to 0.95. I don't think it's going to be as good as the Magistar Incarnate of the Sampotes or whatever other hammers we're using nowadays, the Archititron or whatever, or even the Fragor. But hey, you know what? The Ekine does exist, and it's getting a Riven buff. So if you like the Ekine, there you go. I know for Slam Wukong builds, people have been considering that one out. I think the Magistar is just to be the one I use personally. And moving on to the Gunson Prime, kind of forgotten weapon right there. From 0.75 to 0.8, this thing is great without a melee or without a Riven for the most part. So you can just put a Riven on there so you have even higher stats than before. Now here's one that's kind of weird. The Harmony going from 0.5 to 0.55. This is one of the most broken weapons in the whole game, and they buff the Rivens on it. That's kind of hilarious to me. I am using no Riven and actually no combo with my Harmony. I'm doing 2 billion damage. So, yeah. There you go. I mean, it probably wasn't even a slobbable Riven in the first place, and I doubt it'll be slobbable after this. It's such a small buff. But it's just kind of funny they're buffing the Harmony because the Harmony is so ridiculously strong. So if you have a Harmony Riven, you're probably happy about that. If you don't have a Harmony Riven, it literally makes no difference at all. So there you go. Masseter Prime, the signature weapon of Grendel, kind of forgotten weapon as well, going from 0.85 to 0.9. Literally no one on Earth cares. Neferi, the fire daggers from the Narmer bounties, going from 0.9 to 0.95. They will sometimes buff this thing. It's actually pretty strong. A little bit of Riven buff here, a little bit of Riven buff there. This thing is getting some pretty strong Rivens at this point. Now here's one that might be a little bit surprising. The Okina Prime going from 0.5 to 0.7. That is a massive buff to a weapon that has pretty good stats in the first place. And word on the street is there might be an Okina Incarnon maybe at some point if you are a good little Tenno. So that means that the Incarnon Rivens would be higher stats. So that's great. This is probably the only Dispo pass we get before those. So yeah, get your 0.7 Dispo Okina Prime Rivens and hopefully it'll be really good. The Ruvox, the fist weapon from... Okay, this one's actually Dante's signature weapon. Dante's signature Incarnon fist weapon. Got a Riven buff from 0.55 to 0.65. I don't really use them that much, but they have some interesting utility stuff they could do. Definitely better than before, at least with this change. Maybe they're going to have 100% minus impact as well on a Riven, but I'm not sure. I haven't really been rolling a Ruvox Riven ever. The Sorrow Fang, the signature weapon of Varuna, is going to get a Riven buff as well. Now it's at neutral Dispo. It's a pretty decent weapon, actually. It's just I don't really ever use Heavy Blades. Heavy Blades don't feel that great in 2024, in my opinion. And the Sarpa, normal, getting a buff from 1.15 to 1.2. I've been waiting for a Sarpa Prime for years. Hopefully they finally make one, but the stats on that would be lower than this. And for Arcwing guns, the final ones here, we got the Larkspur, normal, and Prime getting a Riven buff. Hilariously, the Larkspur Prime is never going to be usable with a Riven because the Rivens are still low stats. They're Arcwing gun Rivens, so they have even lower stats. And also the Mandanel getting a buff from 0.75 to 0.9. So a big Riven buff for the Mandanel, right in time for me to delete my Mandanel Riven because the Mandanel sucks. So yeah, guys, that's going to be your Riven Dispo pass. As far as the biggest winners here, it's definitely going to be the Kuva Sobek getting a big Riven buff there. Lieutenant Galactic getting a hilariously random Riven buff. I'll take it. The Act Magnus Prime getting a massive buff. The Icarius Prime getting a Riven buff for some reason. That was pretty funny. And then also, yeah, the Harmony, of all things, getting a Riven buff. So surprising. Maybe I'll have to get a Harmony Riven. Not that I need it, but maybe like an attack speed Riven or something just to make it attack faster. Yeah, great stuff here, guys. If you have any points you want to point out about this, let me know. I do think that there's definitely, like, you know, I say it every pass. The time has come. Let's get rid of this Dispo system. Let's change it up. Let's make it where, like, you know, when a new Prime weapon comes out, it has to prove itself. The Epitaph Prime has the same stats as the Epitaph Normal in the Riven department. If the Epitaph Prime is more OP, clearly, you could nerf it out over time. But the way they do it right now is it comes out 0.5 Dispo as low as it possibly can go. It's not very fun. It's not very hype. You might know if people are buying VERGLAS Rivens for thousands of plat, hundreds of plat, you know, lots of plat basically. But Epitaph Rivens, not anywhere near as expensive because the hype is not really there as much. Like, you know, maybe a couple hundred plat for an Epitaph Riven, where a VERGLAS Riven would be like, you know, 1,000 plat. So the hype does work, DE. If you have these Rivens with high stats, people do buy them more often than if you have a low stat Riven that is like, well, you know, that's just how the system works. You know, they're always going to be 0.5 when they come out. This right here, the VERGLAS having high stats, should be an example of how, you know, great this can be as far as DE getting money from this. Like, you know, people buy plat. People buy these expensive Rivens. They're using their Prime Access plat. They're going to buy more plat. The fact that they have these low stats at launch is so lame. I hope they do change it someday. But yeah, this is intended. The VERGLAS is intended. The Tor is not getting nerfed. The Akicore is not getting nerfed. And hopefully have a good Kuva Sobek Riven or Harmony Riven. I'll see you guys next time for your support. Take it easy. Bye.